Hi friends. If you see a honeybee swarm, meaning tens of thousands of bees clustered together, hanging in a tree, maybe just like this one, or maybe like this one, or like this one, or maybe you see the bees swarming in the air like this. It's really important that you call somebody, a beekeeper or bee tender, who can come and collect those bees and bring them to a safe nest site or hive body. And then if at all possible, if you're able to stay with those bees until that beekeeper gets there, it might mean life for these bees rather than something happening to them. And I want to tell you a quick story, because sometimes swarming is still misunderstood. And when bees swarm, swarming is the natural reproduction of a honeybee hive, right? We have to look at the hive as one being. And when a hive, in a very simplified way, splits into two, and part of the bees leave with the old queen and cluster in a tree or on a fence post or somewhere, that means they have now left that hive. They're kind of like a soul without a body, and they really are now looking for a new body, a new hive to move into. So they're actually in a very vulnerable state. And people who might not know what a swarm is can still be afraid of swarms, even though swarms are generally very docile. And yeah, so here's my story to illustrate this point of why we still really need to protect swarms. Last year, a woman who works in the floral department of a local grocery store called in a swarm. She had been on her break and noticed that there was a swarm of bees clustered in one of the trees in the parking lot. And the call went to a friend of mine who's on a list of people that you can call when you spot a swarm of honeybees. And she wasn't able to make it, so she called me and she said, would you be able to go get the swarm? Well, I happened to be available that afternoon, so I started driving towards town. And I was about halfway there and I got a call back from her, and she said, you know what, another dear friend, she just found out that another dear friend, who's also an amazing bee tender, was already on her way to retrieve that swarm. So I said, okay, I'll turn around, no problem. And I did have a strange feeling in my gut, but obviously those of us who work so closely together, it's not a competitive thing when it comes to helping to collect a swarm. However, what happened in the meantime, while she was on her way to retrieve this swarm, the woman who had originally called the swarm in had to go back to work, so she went back into the floral department. A few people that were customers at this store saw the swarm and got scared. You know, some people just don't know what bee swarms are, and that they are in such a vulnerable state, and they're very docile. So anyway, they went in and they talked to the manager of this grocery store, and the manager didn't know what to do, so he called corporate headquarters, and corporate headquarters told him to just spray the swarm with pesticide. So 5 minutes before my dear friend arrived, that entire swarm of tens of thousands of bees had been sprayed with pesticide and was dying. So of course my friend was crying and explaining to this man, who really didn't know any better, what this really was. And she did take the opportunity to educate the people at the grocery store and corporate and so on. But I'm telling you this story because I want you to know that this still happens quite often. So if you see a swarm and you call a bee tender and you have the time to sit with the swarm, please do so until they get there. And if somebody else arrives, or somebody gets scared, you can say, no problem, there's a professional coming who's going to collect these bees and bring them to a home. Thank you in advance.